A waitress accidentally spilled wine on a billionaire's son. She expected anger, maybe termination. What she got was electric clippers and a live audience. Douglas Gallardo didn't just humiliate Stacey Alleman in front of New York's elite, he shaved her head while they filmed it for entertainment. But what Douglas didn't know was that the woman trembling on her knees had just stolen his family's entire financial empire. And the man walking through those doors? Park Jae-min, the silent dragon, her fiancé, the most dangerous man in the room, and he'd been watching everything. Welcome to Ruthless Romance Tales. And listen close, you just stepped into something that'll haunt you long after the screen goes dark. If you've been riding with me, you know we don't do predictable, we do dangerous. We do the kind of tension that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. And if you're new, strap in tight. Hit that like button like it's the only thing keeping you grounded. Subscribe because you're already in too deep. And smash that notification bell, because missing what comes next would be criminal. Now let's watch how one woman's calculated risk changed everything. Stacey Alleman's feet were screaming. 14 hours into a double shift at the Azure Heights estate, and the smile she wore felt like broken glass pressing into her face. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, and the kind of wealth that made oxygen feel expensive. Men in tailored suits discussed mergers over 20-year scotch. Women dripping in jewelry laughed at jokes that weren't funny, their voices sharp as the diamonds around their necks. And Stacey? She moved between them like smoke, invisible until someone needed their glass refilled. This was her second job. This morning, she'd waitressed breakfast at a hotel in Harlem. Tomorrow, she'd do it again. Not because she needed survival money, that wasn't the truth anymore. She did it because independence was the only thing in her life she could control. The only thing that felt real. Stacey Alleman was engaged to Park Jae-min, head of the Silent Dragon Syndicate, a man whose name alone made grown men check over their shoulders. He'd offered to end her exhaustion with a single word. One signature, and she'd never serve another entitled socialite. But she'd refused. She needed this, the ache in her spine, the burn in her calves, the proof that she could stand on her own 2 feet. He respected that, even if it killed him to watch her break herself down for people who looked through her like she was air. But tonight wasn't about independence. Tonight was a mission. Hidden beneath her black service glove sat a ring worth more than this entire estate. 5 carats of black jade set in platinum, a promise made in blood, and whispered vows. And hidden in her apron pocket was something far more dangerous. A device no bigger than a credit card that could clone encrypted data from any phone within 6 inches. Stacey wasn't just serving wine, she was hunting. Her target sat at table 4, laughing too loud, drinking too much. Douglas Gallardo, heir to a crumbling real estate empire, desperate son of a man under federal investigation, and the kind of cruel that came from never hearing the word no. His phone sat on the table next to his champagne flute, unlocked, careless. Inside that phone were access codes to offshore accounts in the Caymans, shell companies in Panama, transactions that would bury his entire family. Jae-min needed those codes, and Stacey had promised to get them. She'd broken their one sacred rule to be here, the No Shadows Agreement. Jae-min wasn't allowed to send guards to her workplace. She demanded that boundary, fought for it, threatened to walk if he violated it. She refused to live in a cage, even a gilded one. Tonight, she prayed he'd kept his word. She prayed he wasn't watching. She balanced the tray of vintage red wine, a 1,982 Bordeaux that cost more than most people's cars, and moved toward table 4. Her heart slammed against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. Douglas was mid-story, gesturing wildly, playing to his audience of sycophants and climbers. Stacey positioned herself beside him, the cloning device hidden under the tray's white cloth. 6 inches. That's all she needed. She took one deliberate step forward. Her ankle rolled, the tray tilted, and the wine-deep, blood-red expensive cascaded across Douglas Gallardo's pristine white suit. The room went silent. Douglas stood slowly, wine dripping from his jacket, staining his silk shirt. His face twisted into something ugly, something delighted. He wasn't angry, he was thrilled. "Well," he said, voice dripping with venom and amusement. "Looks like someone just made a very expensive mistake." Stacey's fingers tightened around the device in her pocket. The light blinked green. Transfer complete. She'd done it. She'd stolen his empire. Now she just had to survive the next 60 seconds. Douglas grabbed her wrist, his grip crushing. "You know what I think?" His breath reeked of alcohol and entitlement. "I think you need to learn what happens when people like you ruin things for people like me." He snapped his fingers. "Someone get me clippers. Electric ones. Stacy's blood turned to ice. The room erupted in whispers, phones raising, recording. No one moved to help her. No one ever did. Douglas smiled, wide and vicious. Let's give them a show. The clippers arrived in the hands of a trembling busboy who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Douglas snatched them, testing the buzz against his palm, and the sound metallic, vicious, final cut through the ballroom like a blade. Stacy's knees hit the polished floor before she could stop herself. Not from fear, from calculation. If she fought back, if she made a scene, someone might search her, might find the device, might destroy everything she'd just stolen, so she knelt. And she memorized every face in that room, the woman in the emerald gown who laughed behind her champagne flute, the silver-haired man recording with his phone held high, grinning like this was entertainment, the young couple whispering, thrilled by the spectacle of someone else's destruction. Stacy filed each face away in her mind like evidence, like ammunition. She wasn't a victim. She was a witness building a case. Douglas circled her slowly, savoring the moment. You people, he said, loud enough for the room to hear, think you can walk into our world, mess up our nights, and just apologize your way out of it? He crouched beside her, his cologne suffocating, his smile sharper than the clippers in his hand. But apologies don't fix things. Pain does. Humiliation does. Stacy kept her eyes on the ground, her jaw locked tight, her heart hammered so loud she thought everyone could hear it. The weight of the stolen device pressed against her thigh through the thin fabric of her pocket. She focused on that. On Jae-min. On the haven the community center she'd built for women escaping violence. The place that carried her sister's memory in every brick. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for something bigger. The first strip of hair fell. The clippers dragged across her scalp, cold metal biting into skin, and the sound of her own hair hitting the floor was quieter than she expected. Almost gentle. But the room's reaction wasn't gasps, laughter, the flash of phone cameras lighting up like fireworks. Douglas worked slowly, methodically, making sure everyone got their footage. He was performing. This wasn't about the wine. This was about power. About reminding everyone in this room where they stood in the hierarchy. And Stacy, she was the lesson. But while Douglas humiliated her body, Stacy's mind was 3 moves ahead. She thought about the encrypted files now sitting in her pocket. Bank accounts, wire transfers, names of politicians on the Gallardo payroll, evidence of money laundering that stretched from New York to Singapore. She just handed Jae-min a nuclear weapon, another strip of hair, then another. Stacy's scalp burned where the clippers had scraped too close, drawing thin lines of blood. Her reflection caught in the ballroom's mirrored wall, barely recognizable now, her natural curls disappearing under Douglas's cruelty, but her eyes dark brown, fierce, unbroken, stared back at her with something that looked less like defeat and more like rage wrapped in patience. Douglas stepped back to admire his work, breathing hard, face flushed with the sick satisfaction of a man who'd finally found something he could control. There, he announced, turning to his audience like a painter unveiling a masterpiece. Much better. Now she matches her station. The room erupted in nervous laughter, the kind that came from people who knew they were witnessing something wrong but were too cowardly to stop it. Stacy stayed on her knees, her hands flat against the cold floor, her breathing measured. She counted to 10, then 20, waiting for the adrenaline to stop screaming at her, to run, to fight, to do anything but stay still. Douglas tossed the clippers onto the table with a clatter. "Clean yourself up," he spat, waving her away like garbage. "And get out of my sight before I—" The ballroom doors exploded inward, not opened, exploded. The heavy oak slammed against the walls with a crack that silenced every whisper, every laugh, every breath. The chandeliers shuddered, wine glasses toppled, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Park Jae-min stepped through the wreckage like a storm given human form. His eyes found Stacy on the floor, her head shaved, her uniform stained, her hands trembling, and something in his expression shifted from cold to glacial, from dangerous to apocalyptic. Douglas Gallardo had no idea he was already dead. Chapter 2. The Silent Dragon. Jae-min didn't run, didn't shout. He walked with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who had all the time in the world because he owned every second of it. His black suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection, but it was his face that stopped hearts expressionless, cold, beautiful in the way a knife blade catches light. The crowd parted without being asked. Survival instinct. Stacy's breath caught in her chest. He wasn't supposed to be here. She'd checked the schedule 3 times. He was supposed to arrive at 9:30, after she'd already secured the data and disappeared into the kitchen. It was 8:47. Their eyes met across the ballroom, and in that single glance, she saw the truth. He knew. He'd known from the beginning. The no shadows rule she'd fought so hard for, he'd broken it. Not with a visible guard. With cameras. With surveillance she'd never detected. He'd watched her spill the wine, watched her clone the device, watched every second of her humiliation, and he'd let it happen. The betrayal stabbed through her chest, sharp and hot, but there was something else in his expression, something raw beneath the ice. Rage. Guilt. The kind of fury that came from watching someone you love suffer and forcing yourself to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Douglas finally looked up from his phone, his victory smile still plastered across his flushed face. Who the hell? Park Jae-min. Jae-min's voice was quiet, almost gentle. The kind of quiet that made people lean in to hear. The kind that preceded violence. Owner of this estate as of 4:17 this afternoon, which makes you, Douglas Gallardo, trespassing on my property. The color drained from Douglas's face so fast, Stacy thought he might pass out. That's impossible, Douglas stammered, his bravado cracking like thin ice. Azure Heights has been in the Castellano family for 47 years, yes, until Alessandro Castellano decided his gambling debts were more important than his legacy. Jae-min stopped 3 feet from where Stacy knelt, but he didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Douglas like a predator sizing up prey. I paid those debts. I own the deed. I own the walls. I own the air you're breathing. Stacy pushed herself to her feet, her legs shaking but her spine straight. She felt exposed, vulnerable, her bare scalp cold under the chandelier lights, but she wouldn't stay on her knees, not in front of these people. Not even for the mission. Jae-min's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It was the only sign that seeing her standing affected him. Douglas tried to recover, puffing out his chest. Look, if this is about the waitress, she ruined a $12,000 suit. I was well within my rights to assault a woman? Jae-min's tone didn't change, still that terrible softness. To humiliate her while your friends recorded it for social media? To physically harm her for spilling wine? He tilted his head, studying Douglas like a scientist examining a particularly interesting insect. Tell me, Douglas, when your father goes to prison for tax evasion and wire fraud and he will do you think he'll be proud of how you spent his last days of freedom, shaving a woman's head for entertainment? Douglas's face went from white to gray. How do you know about... I know everything about you. Jae-min finally moved, reaching into his jacket pocket. Douglas flinched, but Jae-min only pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward the crowd. I know about the Cayman accounts, the shell corporations in Panama, the bribes to city councilmen, the real estate deals with Russian oligarchs. I know about the SEC investigation your father thinks he's hidden. I know about the FBI raids scheduled for Monday morning. The ballroom erupted in whispers. Phones disappeared into pockets. People edged toward exits. Stacy's hand instinctively moved to her pocket, feeling the device's outline. He didn't need what she'd stolen. He already had everything. So why had he let her risk herself? Why had he watched her get hurt? Jae-min's eyes flicked to her for just a heartbeat, and she saw the answer there. He'd given her what she needed, not the data, but proof. Proof that Douglas was the monster she'd suspected. Proof that would hold up in court. Proof that couldn't be dismissed as fabricated or coerced. He'd let her be hurt to build an airtight case. The realization should have made her furious. Instead, it made her cold. They'd both sacrificed her safety for the mission. She'd volunteered. He'd allowed it. They were more alike than she wanted to admit. Douglas lunged. Not at Jae-min, he wasn't that stupid. At Stacy. His hand shot out, grabbing for her pocket, his survival instinct finally kicking in. She took something. She stole. Jae-min moved. One moment he was 5 feet away. The next, his hand was wrapped around Douglas's throat, lifting him onto his toes. No visible effort, no strain, just cold, efficient violence. Don't, Jae-min whispered, his voice dropping so low only Douglas and Stacy could hear. Touch what belongs to me. He released Douglas, who crumpled to the floor, gasping. Jae-min finally turned to Stacy. He shrugged off his jacket, black silk, custom-made, still warm from his body, and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was tender, possessive, and absolutely deliberate. He was marking her in front of everyone. We're leaving, he said quietly, his hand settling on the small of her back, but Stacy didn't move. She looked down at Douglas, still coughing on the floor, and then at the crowd of people who'd filmed her humiliation. Her voice came out steady, clear. I want to press charges. Jamin's expression shifted surprise, then something that looked almost like pride. Against him, she continued, pointing at Douglas, and everyone who recorded it without intervening. That's facilitation of assault in New York State. The room exploded in panic. The limousine's interior smelled like leather and rain. Outside, the city blurred past in streaks of neon and shadow. But inside, the silence was suffocating. Stacy sat as far from Jamin as the seat allowed, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, her reflection in the tinted window showing a stranger with a bare scalp and eyes that burned. Jamin hadn't spoken since they'd left Azure Heights, hadn't touched her beyond that single hand on her back. He sat with his fingers steepled, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Finally, Stacy broke. How long? How long what? His voice was neutral, careful. How long have you been watching me? At work. Breaking our agreement. She turned to face him fully, and the anger she'd been swallowing down rose hot in her throat. The no shadows rule was the one thing I asked for, Jamin, the one boundary that mattered. 3 months. No apology, no justification, just truth. Stacy's hands curled into fists against her thighs. 3 months of lies. 3 months of keeping you alive. His composure cracked just slightly. A hairline fracture in ice. Do you have any idea how many contracts have been placed on people associated with me? How many enemies would love nothing more than to hurt me through you? I didn't ask to be protected like some fragile thing that can't handle the world. You asked to infiltrate the Gallardo operation. His voice rose for the first time, sharp and raw. You volunteered to walk into a room full of vipers with nothing but a cloning device and a prayer. You think I could just let you do that blind? Trust that nothing would go wrong? Yes, Stacy shot back. That's what trust means. I was doing my job, our job, and you turned me into a puppet on your surveillance feed. The car swerved slightly as the driver took a corner too fast, probably trying to escape the tension. Jamin leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and for the first time since she'd met him 2 years ago, he looked tired. I watched him hurt you. I stood outside those doors and watched that bastard humiliate you, and I had to force myself not to walk in. Do you know what that cost me? You should have trusted me to handle it. He put his hands on you, Stacy. He shaved your head in front of 50 people who filmed it for entertainment. His voice dropped to something dangerous, something barely controlled. And you're angry at me for making sure you weren't alone? Stacy pulled the cloning device from her pocket and threw it at him. It hit his chest and clattered onto the seat between them. I got what you needed. I did my part. But you robbed me of something I can't get back, my choice. My agency. You let me think I was in control when you were pulling the strings the entire time. Jamin picked up the device, turning it over in his hands. I didn't need this. I know. You told the whole ballroom you already had everything. Then why did you do it? He looked up at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression now. Something that looked almost like fear. Why risk yourself for data I didn't need? Stacy's throat tightened. Because I needed to prove I could. Because everyone in your world sees me as the woman you protect, not the woman who stands beside you. Because I'm tired of being loved like I'm breakable. The words hung between them, sharp and honest. You're not breakable, Jamin said quietly. You're terrifying. You walked into that room knowing exactly what Douglas was capable of. You let him hurt you to get evidence that will destroy his entire family. You stood up afterward and demanded justice from a crowd of cowards. He reached across the space between them, his fingers hovering near her face but not touching. You think I don't see your strength? Stacy, I'm scared of it, because it makes you willing to sacrifice yourself for principles, and I can't lose you to your own courage. Stacy's breath caught. This was the truth beneath the surveillance, beneath the broken promise. Not control. Fear. Then don't love me like I need saving, she whispered. Love me like I'm your equal. I do. His hand finally touched her jaw, gentle, reverent. That's why I'm terrified. The limousine pulled up to an unfamiliar building, not his estate, not her apartment. Somewhere else entirely. Jamin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted from tender to lethal in a heartbeat. We have a problem. What kind of problem? He turned the screen toward her. It was a news alert. Gallardo here found dead in apparent suicide, but beneath the headline was a photo. Douglas Gallardo, very much alive, boarding a private jet. Someone had faked his death, and whoever did it wanted them to think he was gone. The safe house was nothing like Jamin's usual properties. No crystal chandeliers, no imported furniture. Just clean lines, reinforced walls, and windows that didn't break. Functional. Anonymous. The kind of place that didn't exist on any official record. Stacy stood in the center of the main room, still wearing Jamin's jacket, while he worked his phone with the focused intensity of a man dismantling a bomb. 3 calls in rapid succession, each one in Korean, his voice clipped and precise. When he finally lowered the phone, his expression was unreadable. Douglas never made it to the jet. What? The plane left. Empty. The photo was staged. He pulled up security footage on a tablet, showing Douglas boarding the aircraft at Teterboro Airport. But the timestamp was wrong 30 minutes before the news broke. Someone wanted us to see him escape, wanted us to believe he was running. Stacy's mind raced. Who benefits from us thinking Douglas is gone? Anyone who needs him alive, but invisible. Jamin swiped through more files. The FBI raid on the Gallardo estate happened 6 hours ago. Victor Gallardo was arrested. But here's the interesting part. Douglas was supposed to be there. House arrest while awaiting trial. Instead, his ankle monitor was found cut in his bedroom, and the news reports a suicide. But you don't buy it. Douglas is a coward, not a martyr. He wouldn't kill himself. He'd run, or hide, or make a deal. Jamin set down the tablet and looked at her directly, which means someone extracted him, made it look like death so the search would stop. Stacy moved to the window, looking out at the city lights, stretching endlessly. Her reflection stared back unfamiliar, exposed, the harsh line of her shaved scalp, a constant reminder of the evening's violence. Who has the resources to fake a death and fool the FBI? Shortlist. Foreign governments, rival syndicates. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Or, someone inside my organization. The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Stacy turned slowly. You think you have a leak? I think tonight was too coordinated. The timing of your assignment. Douglas being at Azure Heights on the exact night I finalized the purchase. The media already having the suicide story ready to go. His jaw tightened. Someone knew our play before we made it. Stacy's stomach dropped. She'd walked into that ballroom thinking she was in control, thinking she was the hunter. But if Jamin was right, she'd been the bait all along. They wanted me to get caught. No. Jamin crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about him. They wanted me to react. They wanted to see how far I'd go to protect you. This wasn't about Douglas or the Gallardo Empire. This was about measuring my weakness. I'm not your weakness. You're the only thing in this world that could make me burn it all down. His thumb traced the curve of her jaw. And now someone knows that. Before Stacy could respond, Jamin's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shuddered. I need to take this. He stepped into the next room, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet. Stacy stood alone, processing. If someone inside the Silent Dragon Syndicate was feeding information to enemies, then everything she and Jamin had built together was compromised. Every plan, every operation, every moment of vulnerability. She moved to the tablet he'd left on the table, scrolling through the files. Douglas's fake suicide, the FBI raid timeline, Victor Gallardo's arrest record, but then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A photo, buried in the metadata of the news article. A reflection in the window of the jet. Someone standing on the tarmac, watching Douglas board. The image was grainy, distant, but the figure's posture was unmistakable. Stacy had seen that stance before. Tonight, in the ballroom, it was one of Jamin's own guards, a man who'd stood silent in the shadows while Douglas had hurt her, who'd made no move to intervene even as Jamin's fiancé was humiliated in front of 50 witnesses. The guard's name was Kang Dae-won, Jamin's head of personal security, the man he trusted with his life. Stacy's hands shook as she screenshotted the image. The betrayal went deeper than a simple leak. This was someone in Jamin's inner circle. Someone who had access to everything. Jamin returned, his face grim. That was my contact at the FBI. They're officially closing the Douglas Gallardo case. Suicide by gunshot. Case sealed. Jamin, Stacy said carefully, turning the tablet toward him. We need to talk about Kang Dae-won. He looked at the screen. His face went perfectly still, the kind of stillness that preceded earthquakes. Where's he now? Stacy asked. Jamin's voice was ice. He's supposed to be guarding this safe house. They both turned toward the door at the same moment. It was already open. Kang Dae-won stood in the doorway, hands raised in a gesture of surrender that somehow felt more threatening than comforting. He was tall, built like someone who'd spent years in military training, with a scar running down his left cheek that Jamin had once told her came from taking a bullet meant for him. Before you kill me, Dae-won said calmly, his eyes moving between them, you should know that Douglas Gallardo is in the building, 12th floor, room 1207. Jamin's hand moved to the gun holstered beneath his jacket. Give me one reason not to put you down right now. Because I'm not the traitor you think I am. Day One stepped inside, closing the door behind him with his foot, his hands still raised. And because if you shoot me, you'll never know who really orchestrated tonight. Stacy's mind raced. This was too easy, too convenient. You were at the airport. We have photographic evidence. Yes, I was. Day One's expression didn't change. Because I was the one who pulled Douglas off that plane before it took off. The one who brought him here. The one who made sure the news reported exactly what we needed them to report. We, Jamin's voice was lethal. You and me, whether you knew it or not. Day One finally lowered his hands. Slowly, deliberately. 3 months ago, you asked me to run a background check on everyone, with access to your operational files. You suspected a leak but didn't know where. I found it. Not in your organization. In hers. All eyes turned to Stacy. Her blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? The Haven, your community center. Day One pulled out his phone, displaying a series of financial records. Someone's been using your nonprofit as a shell corporation. Laundering money through your donation accounts. Small amounts, traceable only if you know what to look for. And every transaction coincides with intelligence leaks about Mr. Park's operations. Stacy's world tilted. The Haven was her sister's legacy. The one pure thing in her life untouched by Jamin's world. That's impossible. I review every donation personally. I would have noticed. Not if your accountant was in on it. Day One swiped to another image. A woman Stacy recognized immediately. Linda Okafor, her finance director. Someone she'd trusted for 3 years. Someone who'd helped build the Haven from nothing. Linda? Stacy's voice cracked. She wouldn't. She did. For $200,000 over 18 months. Day One's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical. Paid by Victor Gallardo to funnel information about your movements, your relationship with Mr. Park, and your vulnerabilities. Tonight was supposed to be the endgame. Get you humiliated. Get Mr. Park to retaliate publicly. Create enough chaos for the FBI to investigate him instead of the Gallardos. Jamin's gun lowered slightly, his analytical mind clearly working through the implications. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed proof. Real proof. The kind that would hold up in court and wouldn't compromise your relationship with Stacy. Day One looked at her directly. You love the Haven. If I'd told him his enemies were using your charity, what would you have done? Stacy's throat tightened. I would have shut it down. Destroyed everything I built to protect him. Exactly. So I went dark. Let Linda think I was the actual traitor. Let her believe I was selling information to the Gallardos so I could track where it went and who was receiving it. Day One pocketed his phone. Tonight I extracted Douglas before he could actually flee. Made it look like suicide so the real players would get comfortable. Sloppy. And now we have him in a room upstairs, ready to testify against everyone who helped him. Jamin studied his head of security for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he started laughing. Not humor. Something darker. You've been running a counterintelligence operation for 3 months without telling me. You taught me to trust no one, even you. The tension in the room shifted, but didn't break. Stacy stepped forward. If Linda's been using the Haven, then she knows where the real money goes. The women we help, the shelters we fund. Her voice hardened. She's put every single person we've protected at risk, which is why she's already been arrested. Day One checked his watch. FBI picked her up 40 minutes ago. She's currently negotiating witness protection in exchange for testimony against Victor Gallardo's entire network. Stacy felt simultaneously relieved and gutted. 3 years of trust, shattered. I want to see Douglas. Now. Jamin and Day One exchanged glances. Stacy, Jamin started. He's not stable. When we pulled him from the plane, I don't care. He took something from me tonight. I want to look him in the eye and watch him realize he lost everything for nothing. Jamin studied her face, then nodded once. 12th floor. They took the stairs. Room 1207 smelled like fear and stale cigarettes. Douglas Gallardo sat handcuffed to a chair in the center of the bare room, his white suit still stained with wine, his hair disheveled, eyes red-rimmed from crying or rage or both. When he saw Stacy walk through the door, something ugly twisted across his face. You, he spat, lunging against his restraints. The chair scraped against the floor but held. You ruined everything. You and your... Jamin's presence behind Stacy silenced him mid-sentence. Douglas's bravado crumbled like wet paper. Stacy moved closer, studying him the way a scientist studies a specimen. This was the man who'd humiliated her in front of New York's elite, who'd held clippers to her scalp and smiled while doing it. Now he looked small, pathetic, exactly like what he was, a spoiled child who'd finally met consequences. "Why me?" she asked quietly. Douglas blinked, confused. "What? Of all the servers at Azure Heights tonight, why did you choose me?" Stacy crouched down to his eye level, her voice steady. "Was it random, or did someone tell you to target me specifically?" Douglas's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Day One stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "We already know Linda Okafor fed the Gallardos information about Stacy. But what we don't know is whether tonight was opportunistic or planned." He showed Douglas a photo. "This is your father, meeting with Linda 3 days ago. What did they discuss?" "I want a lawyer," Douglas said, but his voice shook. Jamin circled around the chair, his movements predatory. "Your father's already negotiating his own deal. He gave up your offshore accounts, your shell companies, and most interestingly, he told the FBI you were the one who ordered the bribes to city officials. He's pinning 20 years of fraud on you to save himself." Douglas's face went white. "He wouldn't." "He did. This morning. Before he was even processed." Jamin leaned down, his voice dropping to that terrible softness. "Victor Gallardo threw you to the wolves to save his own skin. So tell me, Douglas, why are you protecting a man who's already buried you?" Stacy watched the exact moment Douglas broke. His shoulders sagged, tears streaming down his face. "It wasn't supposed to go like this. I was just supposed to embarrass her, make a scene. Dad said if I could get Park Jae-min to retaliate publicly, the FBI would have probable cause to investigate him instead of us. So it was planned," Stacy said, her voice hollow. "My humiliation was a setup. Linda told Dad you'd be working table 4, that you were engaged to Park but kept it secret. Dad figured if I hurt you badly enough, Park would lose control." Douglas laughed bitterly. "But he didn't lose control, did he? He was ice cold, professional, which means I destroyed myself for nothing." Stacy felt Jamin's hand settle on her shoulder, grounding her. She wanted to feel angry, wanted to feel victorious, but all she felt was tired. "The Clippers," she said suddenly. "Whose idea was that?" Douglas wouldn't meet her eyes. "Mine. Dad just said to embarrass you. The rest, that was me wanting to feel powerful." He looked up then, and there was something broken in his expression. "I'm not a good person. I know that. My whole life, I've watched my father buy his way out of consequences, hurt people for sport. I thought that's what power was, hurting people who can't hurt you back. And now?" Stacy asked. "Now I'm facing 20 years in federal prison for crimes my father committed, but I was stupid enough to put my name on." Douglas's voice cracked. "And the worst part? The absolute worst part? I did the one thing he told me not to do. I touched someone Park Jae-min loves. Dad warned me, said there were lines even we don't cross. But I was drunk and angry and I wanted to prove I was more ruthless than him." Stacy stood, looking down at this man who tried to destroy her. "You succeeded. You are more ruthless than your father. But that's not the compliment you think it is." She turned to Jamin. "I'm done here. Let the FBI have him." But as they reached the door, Douglas called out, his voice desperate. "Wait, there's something else. Something Linda told my father. About the Haven." Stacy froze. "What about the Haven?" Douglas swallowed hard. "Linda wasn't just laundering money through your charity. She was documenting every woman who came through your doors. Names, addresses, stories. She sold that information to people looking for specific targets." The room went silent. Stacy's voice came out barely above a whisper. "How many women?" "All of them. Every single woman you've helped in 3 years." Stacy's knees buckled. Jamin caught her before she hit the floor, but she could barely hear him over the roaring in her ears. She'd built the Haven to protect vulnerable women, and she'd accidentally handed their information to predators. Stacy sat on the edge of the safe-house bed, phone pressed to her ear, waiting for the 17th call to connect. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and ash. She'd been awake for 32 hours straight, fueled by rage and coffee that tasted like battery acid. "Maya, it's Stacy. Don't hang up, I need you to listen." Her voice was hoarse from too many conversations just like this one. "Linda Okafor has been arrested for selling your information to, yes, the Linda you trusted. I know. But right now I need you to go to the safe address I texted you. There's money, new documents, everything you need to disappear until we clean this up." She listened to Maya cry, offered what comfort she could, then disconnected and moved to the next name on her list. 43 women. That's how many had come through the Haven's doors in 3 years. 43 women running from violence, seeking shelter, trusting Stacy to protect them. And she'd failed every single one. Jae-min entered the room carrying food she wouldn't eat. He set it down anyway. A quiet presence in her peripheral vision. Day One's team has located 38 of them. They're being moved to secure locations. That leaves 5 unaccounted for. Stacy's hands trembled as she dialed the next number. We'll find them. And if we don't? If someone's already... She couldn't finish the sentence. Jae-min sat beside her, close but not touching. Then we burn down everyone who bought that information. Methodically, completely, until there's nothing left but ash and legal consequences. Stacy wanted to find comfort in his certainty, but guilt sat too heavy in her chest. I built something beautiful and turned it into a weapon. Those women came to me because they had nowhere else to go, and You saved them. First. Jaemin's voice was firm. Linda betrayed them. Victor Gallardo exploited them. You gave them hope when they had none. Don't let what came after erase what came before. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know where the 5 missing women are, and I know who bought their information. Meet me at Riverside Park. North entrance, 1 hour. Come alone. A friend. Stacy showed Jae-min the message. His expression darkened immediately. Obvious trap, he said. Obviously. She stood, grabbing her jacket, his jacket, still, because wearing it made her feel less exposed. Which is why you're going to let me walk into it. Absolutely not. Jae-min. She turned to face him fully. Last night, you let me make my own choices even when they terrified you. Don't stop now. Whoever sent this has information about 5 women whose lives are in danger. I have to go. Then I'm coming with you. The message said come alone. I don't care what the message said. You're not... He stopped himself, jaw clenched tight. She could see the war happening behind his eyes between the man who wanted to protect her and the man who'd promised to treat her as an equal. Stacy stepped closer, her hand finding his. I need you to trust me the way I've learned to trust you. Even when it's terrifying. Even when every instinct says to lock me in a room where nothing can hurt me. She squeezed his fingers. I'm not walking in blind. I'll wear a wire. Day One can position his team within 100 yards. But I need to be the one who goes through that door. Jae-min stared at her for a long moment, and she watched something shift in his expression. Acceptance. Respect. Fear wrapped in love. You wear Kevlar under that jacket. Deal. And you take this? He pulled a small panic button from his pocket, disguised as a phone charm. 3 clicks and we storm in. Agreed. An hour later, Stacy stood at Riverside Park's north entrance, watching the Hudson River catch morning light. The park was nearly empty, too early for joggers, too cold for anyone without purpose. She spotted the bench immediately. Someone sat there, back to her, wearing a hood that obscured their face. Stacy approached slowly, every nerve ending alive with awareness. Daewon's voice crackled softly in her hidden earpiece. We have eyes on you. 6 positions. Say the word and we move. The figure on the bench turned. Stacy's breath caught. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone she recognized. Someone who shouldn't be here, shouldn't be free, shouldn't be alive. Linda Okafor smiled at her, and in her hand was a gun pointed directly at Stacy's chest. Hello, boss. We need to talk about who really runs the Haven. You're supposed to be in federal custody. Stacy's voice came out steady despite the gun aimed at her heart. She didn't move, didn't reach for the panic button. Not yet. Linda laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. I was, for about 6 hours. Then I made a phone call to someone who values my services more than the FBI values their paperwork. She gestured with the gun. Sit down. Slowly, Stacy sat on the opposite end of the bench, calculating distances, angles, sightlines. Daewon's team was out there, but if Linda fired first, Kevlar wouldn't save her from this range. You said you know where the 5 missing women are. I do, because I'm the one who moved them. Linda's expression was calm, almost pleasant, like they were discussing quarterly budgets over coffee. Did you really think I was just some accountant the Gallardos bought? Stacy, I've been running my own operation for 5 years. The Gallardos were clients. You were a client. The women who came through the Haven? Also clients. The words took a moment to land. What are you talking about? The Haven was never yours. Not really. Linda shifted the gun slightly, keeping it trained but relaxed. 3 years ago, you came to me with a dream. Help women escape abuse. Noble. Beautiful. Naive. I saw something different. An infrastructure for moving vulnerable people who society already considered invisible. Women with no family ties, no paper trails, no one asking questions when they disappeared. Stacy's stomach turned to ice. You trafficked them. I relocated them. There's a difference. Linda's tone was matter of fact, unbothered. Most of them went willingly. Rich families need domestic workers who won't complain. International corporations need employees who won't report labor violations. Some went into marriages with men who paid premium prices for American citizenship. Everyone got what they wanted. They came to us for safety. And you sold them like, Stacy couldn't finish, bile rising in her throat, like assets. Because that's what vulnerable people become in this world, assets or liabilities. I just chose which one they'd be. Linda leaned back against the bench, almost conversational now. You know what the funny part is? You made it so easy. Every intake form, every background check, every story of abuse, you documented everything. You built me a catalog of broken women desperate enough to believe in rescue. Stacy's hand inched toward the panic button hidden in her pocket. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm offering you a choice. Linda's eyes glittered with something that looked almost like admiration. You've spent 3 years playing hero, and where has it gotten you? Engaged to a gangster, humiliated by a spoiled rich boy, caught in a war you didn't start. You're brilliant, Stacy. Your organizational skills, your ability to connect with people, your ruthless dedication to your cause. Do you know how rare that is? Get to the point. Work with me. Really work with me. Not as my unwitting cover, but as my partner. Linda lowered the gun slightly, a gesture of good faith that felt more threatening than the weapon itself. Think about it. You hate people like Douglas Gallardo, people who hurt the powerless for sport. What if instead of saving women one at a time, we built an empire that made predators pay? Literally. We identify abusers, extract their victims, and charge fortunes for the service. We use their guilt money to fund actual change. You're insane. I'm practical. The world is full of women who need saving, and men willing to pay for redemption. Why not be the broker? Linda stood slowly, the gun now pointed at the ground, but still in her hand. The 5 women you're looking for? They're safe, happy even. One's in Singapore working for a tech CEO who pays triple minimum wage. Another's in Vancouver with a family who treats her like a daughter. I can show you proof. Testimonials. Bank statements showing the money they're making. Stacy felt something crack inside her chest. Even if that were true, even if some of them ended up okay, you took their choice. You turned my charity into a human trafficking operation. I turned your charity into something sustainable. How long were you going to keep funding the Haven on your own? How many more years of waitressing to prove your independence while women kept coming through doors you could barely afford to keep open? Linda's voice softened, almost gentle. I saw your potential and gave you resources. The Gallardo money, the offshore accounts that wasn't them funding me. That was me funding you. Stacy's mind reeled. Every donation, every grant, every mysterious benefactor who'd kept the Haven solvent when it should have collapsed, all of it contaminated by money earned selling women's information. Last chance, Stacy. Join me, or I disappear with everything I know about your operation, Jamin's syndicate, and 43 women whose new lives depend on my silence. Linda raised the gun again, not threatening, just present. Choose. Stacy looked at Linda, this woman she'd trusted, worked beside, built something with, and saw a mirror of a future she could have become. Someone who rationalized evil as pragmatism, someone who turned compassion into currency. I choose to watch you burn. Stacy clicked the panic button 3 times. Linda's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to rage in the span of a heartbeat. She raised the gun, finger moving to the trigger. The shot came from behind Stacy. Linda dropped, the gun clattering across concrete. Not dead, shoulder wound. Clean, professional, designed to disarm, not kill. Jamin emerged from behind a maintenance building, his own weapon still raised, his face carved from stone. You really thought I'd let her come alone? Day One's team swarmed in from 6 directions, securing Linda before she could reach for the fallen gun. Stacy stood on shaking legs and walked to where Linda lay bleeding, agents already applying pressure to the wound. Where are they? The 5 women. Real locations, or I let Jamin ask the questions his way. Linda laughed through her pain. You're already more like me than you want to admit. I'm nothing like you. Now talk. 6 weeks later, Stacy stood in front of what used to be the Haven. The building looked the same from the outside: red brick, green door, the hand-painted sign her sister would have loved, but inside, everything had changed. The 5 women Linda had moved were found within 72 hours. 3 had indeed gone to legitimate placements, well-paid positions with families who treated them with dignity. Those women chose to stay. 2 others had been sold to labor operations in garment factories overseas. Jae-min's contacts extracted them within a week. Linda Okafor was currently in a federal facility awaiting trial on 17 counts of human trafficking, conspiracy, and racketeering. She tried to negotiate again, offering names of everyone in her network. The FBI took the information, then revoked the deal. Some bridges, once burned, stayed ash. Douglas Gallardo was serving 15 years. Not for the haircut, though that assault charge stuck, but for his role in his father's fraud empire. Victor Gallardo got 25 years. Neither father nor son spoke to each other anymore. The family name, once synonymous with real estate power, now meant cautionary tale. Stacy pushed open the green door. Inside, the space had been completely transformed. No more intake desks or counseling rooms. Now it was a legal aid center, staffed by lawyers who worked pro bono for trafficking victims. A coalition of 3 other nonprofits had merged with what remained of the Haven, bringing oversight, transparency, and resources Stacy alone could never have provided. She wasn't the director anymore. That role belonged to someone with 20 years of experience and no connections to organized crime. But Stacy sat on the board, using everything she'd learned about building trust with vulnerable women to help shape policy. It wasn't what she'd envisioned 3 years ago. It was better, safer, real. "You ready?" Jae-min's voice came from the doorway. He wore a simple black sweater and jeans, no suits today, no weapons visible, just a man waiting for his fiancé. Stacy touched the walls one last time, feeling the history embedded in the plaster. Her sister's dream, Linda's betrayal, 43 women's stories. "Yeah, I'm ready." They walked out together, and Stacy locked the door behind her. Not an ending, a transformation. The car waiting for them wasn't a limousine, just a regular sedan, the kind that didn't attract attention. Daewon sat in the driver's seat, loyal as ever, though now he reported directly to Stacy as well as Jae-min. The surveillance of her had stopped. The no shadows rule had been renegotiated into something more honest. She accepted protection when the threat was real, and he accepted her autonomy when it wasn't. "Where to?" Daewon asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. Stacy looked at Jae-min. They'd been having this conversation in pieces for 6 weeks, dancing around the question neither wanted to ask directly. "I need to tell you something," she said finally, "and you're not going to like it." Jae-min's expression didn't change, but she saw the tension in his shoulders. "Say it. I don't want to be your wife." Silence filled the car. Daewon's eyes went wide in the mirror. Stacy continued quickly, before she lost her nerve. "I don't want the wedding you've been planning, the merger of families, the political alliance. I don't want to be the woman who stands beside the silent dragon and looks beautiful at galas." She turned to face him fully. "I want to be your partner, actually your partner. Not in the shadows, not pretending to be something I'm not. I want to work with you, build something with you that isn't about protection or possession or proving anything to anyone." Jae-min stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the controlled expression he wore for business. Something genuine, almost relieved. "I canceled the wedding planner 3 weeks ago." Stacy blinked. The estate wedding, the 500 guests, the merger ceremony my family expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black jade ring she'd been wearing that night at Azure Heights. She'd taken it off after Linda's arrest, unsure what it meant anymore. "This ring was never about ownership. It was a promise that I'd never ask you to be less than you are." He held it between them. Not offering, not demanding, just present. "So here's my counter-proposal," Jae-min said quietly. "No wedding, no public ceremony, just you and me, building something neither of us could build alone. You do the work that matters to you, I do the work that matters to me, and when those worlds intersect, we handle it together, as equals." Stacy felt tears prick her eyes. "What about the silent dragon? Your empire? I'm restructuring, legitimizing what can be legitimized, burning what can't." His voice was steady, certain. "I've spent 10 years building power through fear. I'd rather spend the next 10 building something through choice. Your family will never accept that. My family doesn't have to live my life. I do." He opened his palm, the ring catching light. "So what do you say? Partners?" Stacy looked at the ring, then at the man holding it. 6 weeks ago, she'd thought love meant grand gestures and perfect moments. Now she understood it meant hard conversations and mutual evolution. It meant choosing someone every day, even when that choice was complicated. Especially when it was complicated, She took the ring and slid it onto her own finger. Partners. But I'm keeping my name. I wouldn't have it any other way. Daewon cleared his throat. So, where am I actually driving? Stacy and Jaemin looked at each other and laughed, the sound genuine and light. Home, they said in unison. Not his estate. Not her apartment. The place they'd bought together last week, a modest brownstone in Brooklyn with space for an office and a garden and a life that belonged to both of them. As the car pulled into traffic, Stacy looked out the window at the city passing by. Somewhere out there, 43 women were rebuilding their lives. Douglas Gallardo was learning that actions had consequences. Linda Okafor was facing the justice system she'd tried to exploit, and Stacey Alleman was finally, truly free. Not because someone saved her. Because she'd saved herself, then chosen to let someone walk beside her through what came next. 3 months later, a small article appeared in a legal journal. Former trafficking victim advocates launch revolutionary legal defense fund. The photo showed Stacy at a press conference. Her hair grown back into a short, elegant cut that framed her face like a crown. Beside her stood Park Jae-min, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not possessive, but supportive. The silent dragon had evolved. And so had the queen who chose to stand with him. Not behind him. Not in front of him. Beside him, exactly where she belonged. Power isn't about controlling others. It's about refusing to be controlled while building something worth protecting. The strongest empires aren't built on fear, they're built on the courage to transform when transformation is required. If this story of transformation, partnership, and refusing to be anyone's victim spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, drop a comment about what moment hit you hardest, and subscribe to Ruthless Romance Tales for more stories about people who refuse to play by the rules written for them. We don't do fairy tales here, we do real love, complicated choices, and the kind of endings you earn, not the ones you're given. Turn on notifications, because the next story, it's already waiting, and it's darker than you think. Stay dangerous, stay authentic, and remember, the best revenge is becoming someone who doesn't need it anymore.